So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Total Drama, so let's start the series. As he stepped out in front of the camera, Chris McLean, your presenter, announced, "We are coming at you live from Camp Wanaka somewhere near Mocha, Ontario, and I am unleashing season 1 of the hottest new reality shows on." When he came to a stop at the intersection of the T-shaped docks, he said, "Here's the deal. 23 campers have signed up to spend 8 weeks at this crummy old summer camp. They will compete in challenges against each other and then have to face the judgment of their fellow campers. Every 3 days, one team will either win a reward or watch one of their team members walk down the dock of shame, take a ride on the loser boat, and depart Total Drama Island 4. As he held up a small treasure chest full of gold and gems, he said, "Good, the one left standing at the end will win cheesy tabloid fame and a small fortune that, let's face it, they will blow through in a week." Chris added that every moment would be captured on one of the hundreds of cameras placed throughout the camp, and they panned over to a few of the cameras before returning to him. "Find out here right now on Total Drama Island," he said as the camera panned out, and "We told our first 12 campers that they would all be sleeping at a 5-star resort, so if they seemed a little prickly," the cameraman gestured that the theme music was playing as a boat drove into the docks. "Welcome back to Total Drama Island." A girl with a modest shape, a smaller breast of a Lobi cup, and a chubby body was the first contestant to be left off by the boat before it drove off to pick up the next. That's probably why the MC laughed. The girl, dressed in pink pants, a teal top, and a green vest with many buttons, was shorter than Chris and had brown hair pulled up in a high ponytail. She wore braces and glasses. "What's up, Chris?" she asked, as the girl ran to him and gave him a smile. "It's so incredulous to meet you. Wow, you're much shorter in real life," she said, stepping back and examining him before noticing the camera and waving at it. "Thanks, Chris," Chris said, a little uncertain about the girl before the boat returned. The next camper was dropped off on the dock. He was a tall, muscular man with dark skin. He was wearing gray cargo shorts, a white beanie, and a green t-shirt with a white shirt underneath. "Hey there, DJ Chris," said the tall man as he put down his 2 bags. "Hey Chris McLean, how's it going?" he asked, giving the host a high five before frowning and asking, "Hey, are you sure you got the right place here? Where's the hot tub?" He wasn't sure they were at the right place, so Chris nodded. "This is it, Camp Waka," Chris remarked as DJ scowled, picked up his bags, and left to join Beth where she was standing. The boat swiftly dropped off the next contestant, who appeared to want to leave right away. The girl had pale skin, teal and black eyes that were clearly dyed black, and teal lipstick on her lips. Her outfit, which consisted of a top that resembled a corset top with light blue short sleeves and green longer sleeves, exposed her mid-to-cup chest because of the low cut and her midriff. She also wore a rather short black and teal skirt, black tights, and black knee-high boots. "Hey Gwen," Chris said, and Gwen scowled as she grudgingly moved forward, gathering her bags before approaching the host. "You mean we're staying here?" she asked, and Chris shook his head. "No, you're staying here," he said, pointing back behind him with a smirk that only caused the girl to glare at him. "I didn't sign up for this," she said. "The great thing about lawyers is that they make lots of copies," he said as he held up another stack of papers. Gwen groaned and picked up her bags, saying, "I'm not staying here." Chris shrugged his shoulders coolly. "I hope you can swim though, because your ride left long ago and the drivers are ordered not to pick up." "Actually you did," he said, holding up a thick stack of papers. Gwen then took it from him and tore it up with a smirk of her own that flattered when she saw his. He said, "Anyone up?" Gwen turned to see that the boat was gone, so she sighed and left before the next contestant's boat arrived. The boat was playing music as it approached the dock, and the contestant on it jammed out to it before cartwheeling off with his luggage dropped off after him. The contestant had blonde hair, with only his bangs showing under his cowl hat. He was wearing an open pink flannel shirt that flaunted his abs and muscles, as well as blue shorts and sandals. As the boat dropped off the next contestant, everyone said, "This is Lindsay." As they looked toward the next contestant, they saw a girl who was the epitome of a bombshell. She was rather tall, blonde-haired, and blue-eyed. "It's an honor to meet you, man," he said, bumping fists with him. "Welcome to the island, man," Jeff said, as he laughed and gave the host a high five. Chris whispered into the camera as Lindsay approached him, saying, "You look so familiar," as he grinned and said, "I'm Chris McLean." The girl had her hair up and a blue bandana on her head. She was wearing a red tube top underneath a brown tank top, which did little to conceal her rather large J-cup chest and also showed off a generous amount of cleavage. As the next boat arrived, the next girl walked off the boat with an aura that screamed angry. She had long straight black hair and gray eyes, which were visible once she took off her sunglasses. Her outfit consisted of a dull maroon halter tube top that pushed up and showed off her lowy cup chest and incredibly short beige shorts that made her look completely lost. The host of the show said, "I hope this jogged your memory." "Oh, that's where I know you from," she said, as Chris sighed and she left. Everyone turned to the dock as the sound of an electric guitar filled the air, asking, "Is that AC/DC DJ?" The next contestant, sitting on the front of the boat, was playing a guitar that was currently connected to a portable amp that was strapped to his hip. The man had spiky blonde hair that stuck out in all directions, defying expectations. The girl, however, stomped over to him, her fists clenched as she looked at him, and she walked past him right away, "Heather," Chris said politely. He was wearing a red trench coat with black flames lining around the bottom, a black button-up shirt, an orange vest underneath, black cargo pants, and black boots. The amp was attached to a dark red Gibson Les Paul guitar that hung off of him by a black shoulder strap. Gravity, who had two spiky bangs framing his tan and strangely whiskered face, was grinning with his eyes closed and appeared not to be playing for intimidation. When he picked up his bags and got off the boat, the man said, "Nice to see you made it, Naruto, and nice entrance." Chris laughed. "What song was that exactly?" Naruto smirked too, "Those about to rock." His figure beneath his clothes was muscular but not overly so, indicating that he was definitely strong and toned but not steroid big or anything remotely like it. "It's a nice little island you got here," Chris should have expected since a five-star resort never seemed your kind of thing. "Song to arrive with," he said, turning to face the other contestants so they could see his bright blue eyes. "Are these the other contestants?" he asked, and Chris nodded. Naruto then approached them, saying, "Nice to meet you all," before a well-known song began to play, drawing them to turn around and reveal the next contestant. Rock music was playing from an amp that was placed on the front, and the man had extremely short black hair and a green mohawk. As Duncan jumped off the boat with his bag and glared at the host, he said, "I don't like surprises." He had a small black goatee, two piercings in each ear, and one through his left eyebrow. His outfit included a spiked collar around his neck, a black shirt with a skull on the front, a white long-sleeved undershirt, blue shorts, and a pair of red Converse shoes. "Nice choice of songs, but we already had someone play some music coming in, so you're a bit behind, Chris, Duncan said, grinning at the host. He crossed his arms and grinned smugly. Yeah, your parole officer warned me about that man. He also told me to give him a holler any time and have you return to juvie. Duncan rolled his eyes and then grinned. Okay, he said, picking up his bag from the dock and walking over to the others. Hello, gorgeous, Duncan said with a smile towards Heather. Drop dead you skis, she said before stomping over to her bags. I am so calling my parents you cannot. She added, make me stay here, as Chris simply waved the contract at her before Duncan placed his bags close to them. Wasn't that a song by Jinu? Naruto grinned as he sat on one of the doctor's posts, still strumming his guitar. Nice job catching that, surprised others actually know of them. Nice Gibson by the way, man, Duncan said, grinning, and Naruto nodded in gratitude as they bumped fists before the next boat began to arrive, honking its horn as they turned to see the next contestant. Ladies and gentlemen, Tyler. Chris introduced his Tyler wave as they watched his boat drive toward them while they were reportedly water skiing behind it. The man appeared to be wearing a red track suit with a matching headband to keep his shoulder-length brown hair in place. However, his little stability was lost, and he began to roll and skip across the water before hitting the dock, which sent one bag into the water and soaking a nearby. The host laughed as he watched a drenched Heather stomp away, and then the next contestant who had just arrived let out a long sigh behind him. The contestant was rather lanky, with shaggy brown hair and a peach fuzz of a goatee on his chin. He wore glasses, a blue t-shirt with a burger on the front, a salmon-colored long-sleeve shirt underneath it, murky green jeans, and a pair of with sneakers and a keyboard and piano under one arm. Harold. Chris said, welcome to camp. After a few moments of looking around, which confused some of the contestants, Harold turned back to face Chris and said, so you mean this show is at a crappy summer camp and not on some big stage or something? Chris nodded and grinned, you got it, before Harold pumped his fist, yes, that is so much more favorable to my skills, and then he left, leaving Chris feeling uncomfortable. Out by the odd contestant before the next one arrived. Next up is Trent. Chris, who said as he walked off his boat and into the host's direction. Trent has short black hair and green eyes, and his outfit included a camel long-sleeve shirt underneath black jeans and tan sneakers, as well as a tan shirt with a black handprint on the front. He was also holding an instrument, but it was a guitar. Hey, nice to see you, man. I saw you on that figure skating show. Nice work. Trent said. He and Chris bumped fists. Well done, man. While some of the campers were a little concerned about them, Trent asked as he looked around him and at the other contestants before Harold disgustingly stuck his finger in his nose, making everyone around him scoot away. That week, Beth raised her hand and said, oh, I saw that one of the guys dropped his partner on her head, so they got immunity. Harold scoffed and said, lucky, and Harold said, I hope I get dropped on my head. Walked over, stood in the area left by people moving away from Harold, and placed him next to Naruto. Nice guitar, man. Mine's acoustic, Trent said, and Naruto grinned. I would have brought my acoustic one, but I'm more of an electric guy myself, he said, continuing to strum on his guitar. No one seemed to mind, Trent said, nodding sympathetically before they turned as the next boat arrived. This time, the contestant at the front was a blonde girl, with her hair pulled back in a ponytail. Before Duncan sneered, nice board, this ain't Malibu, honey. Bridget shrugged her shoulders and said, hey, what's up? She approached the host with her orange and red surfboard in hand, her modest figure with a lowy cup chest concealed by the blue hood she wore, dull blue shorts, and flip-flops. "All right, our surfer chick Bridget is here," she said, standing up her board on its end and holding on to it as she looked around. "On a beach," she said, "we're here," and Chris nodded. The camera then panned to a seagull with a six-packs packaging around its neck before water rose and caused it to float out into the water. Bridget said, "That's disappointing," before Chris grinned, "All right, that makes out," before he was cut off when Bridget's board struck him in the head as she bent down to retrieve her bag. "Damn it, that hurt," Chris complained. Bridget said, smirking, "Hey guys. Campers, hey, I'm Jeff," Jeff said as he moved away from the other guys. "Hey, what's up?" she asked, turning around to see him. "Dang watch," Harold said, before Beth approached to introduce herself. "Hello, I'm Beth," the girl said, delighted to meet new people. "Hey Bridget," she said again, turning around and nearly hitting Duncan Trent and Harold with her board. As he was safe on his post next to Gwen, Naruto said, "Stop making her turn around," and almost smacked the guys off the dock. "Okay, we've all met Surfer Girl," he said, adding, "and I don't feel like watching the commotion of it all and the annoyance of those pushed in that came after. Can we get on with the show, please?" Heather said, wringing out the water from her hair next to Tyler, who had finally gotten out from under the bags. "Someone missed their double cappuccino macchiato the morning," Duncan teased. Harold laughed beside him, dead bent Heather. As the next boat dropped off the next camper, she sneered and gave Duncan a slight glare. The camper was a man with somewhat neat but shaggy hair, wearing a blue short-sleeved button-up shirt with a red vest over it, a white long-sleeved shirt underneath, and dull gray shorts and darker gray sneakers. "You got my memo about my life-threatening allergies?" Chris asked, rubbing his head, "It's still hurting from bridge." Chris said, "I'm sure someone did," as Noah continued to pass him with a bored expression on his face. "Good, is this where we're staying?" Noah asked, pointing to the camp with a hint of disgust. "No, it's your mother's house, and we're throwing a party," Duncan said, smirking as he popped his knuckles. "Cute, nice piercings, original, do them yourself," Noah said sarcastically as Duncan grabbed Noah's lip and with a needle ready to create a hole for a piercing. "Oh, thanks, can I have?" Duncan said, grabbing Noah's lip. Before the next camper arrived, the next woman was definitely curvy with a full figure, her chest easily being cupped with a large and firm rear on her. She had dark skin, black hair pulled back in a ponytail, dark eyes, and a beauty mark on her right cheek. He wore a tight beige top with 4 oranges across her chest, dull blue shorts, and a pair of sandals. "Please put my lip back," Noah asked, completely unfazed by Duncan before the punk let it go with a smirk. "Thank you," Noah added. "I like it, we'll see how well it goes when the game begins," Naruto said, getting a smirk and playful wink from Lana as she waved to the campers as her boat pulled up. "Yo baby, how are you doing? How's it going?" she said as she passed Chris, giving him a high five before moving on to the other campers. "Feel free to quit now and save yourselves the trouble because I came to win," Lana said to the campers. She gave DJ a high five and said, "Oh, what's up, my brother, give me some sugar baby." Harold then appeared behind her and said, "I've never seen a girl like you in real life before," Harold said, as Lana raised an eyebrow at him and placed her hands on her hips. "Excuse me," she said, as Harold held his hands up loudly and large. The nerdy man said, "What did you say to me?" as Leah narrowed her eyes and said, "Oh, you haven't seen anything yet," as she stomped towards the pencil. Lessa was about to leap, but Naruto quickly handed Gwen his guitar and hurried forward after receiving a nod from DJ to help him stop Lana from attacking the boy. "Easy," Naruto said, "keep pushing yourself towards the scrawny boy who did ridiculous karate chops on one leg towards her." "All right, campers, settle down," Chris said as Leah calmed down, allowing Naruto and DJ to release her. Before the blonde-haired guitarist returned to Gwen, she straightened her shirt and handed him back his guitar. Gwen grinned and said, "Sorry, you were closest, and I didn't want Lisa murdering the string bean on live television." Naruto said, "No problem, and at least I can say I've held an expensive guitar like that." "How did you get it?" Gwen asked, having noticed how much Les Pauls went for and they weren't cheating. "My dad wanted to give me a guitar for my birthday, and to show that he supported me in my dream, he gave it to him." "However, how did you know it was an expensive guitar?" Naruto asked, and Gwen smiled and brushed her hair behind her ear. "An artist I like uses a guitar like this, but his is more of an orange gold," she said, and Naruto nodded. "That sounds pretty cool if you ever want to give my dad a guitar like that." He shook his head, saying, "I can't really play, ever been able to find the time." "Because I don't picture you as the guitar trashing type," she said, rolling her eyes with a slight smirk. "I can't really play, ever been able to find the time. Since I feel like we might need to survive this island, being able to play and create music is incredibly relaxing." He joked, making Gwen smile and nod slightly before the next boat arrived. Pulled in this time, it appeared to drop off two girls wearing matching black hairstyles with pigtails and pink short shorts and black and white short tops. The taller and skinnier girl on the left had tan skin, a low C-cup chest, and a bubbly rear, while the chubbier girl on the right had a low C-cup chest and a larger rear. "Ladies, welcome to your new home for 8 weeks, Chris said, gesturing to the camp as the two girls studied it. Before she and Katie let out an excited squeal and hurried off to the other campers, somewhat confusing Chris, the tan girl, who they now assumed to be Katie, said to the chubbier girl, now known as Sight, who happily clapped her hands. This was before the next boat arrived and swiftly dropped off the next camper, a boy who was barely shorter than Chris, wearing a blue beanie over his shaggy brown hair, blue jeans, and dull green shoes. From the first glance, he seemed a little out of place. "What's up, man?" Chris asked, and Ezekiel looked up right away before pointing at something. "I think I see a bird," he said, and some of the other campers laughed more at him than at the joke. "Look, dude, I know you don't get out much, being homeschooled your entire life, raised by freaky prairie people, just don't say much and try not to get kicked off too early," Chris said before gently pushing Ezekiel in the direction of the other campers. The next guy was dropped off by the boat, which arrived quickly. He was also a little scrawny, with short brown hair, wearing a long-sleeved white button-up shirt underneath a cream-colored t-shirt with a blue and red line across the front, blue jeans, and sneakers. To top it off, Cody the Codster was the code. Meister, Chris said as he and Cody finger-gunned each other before high-fiving him and saying, "I see the ladies have already arrived," Cody said as he walked over to the other contestants. The next girl to leave the boat had a sense of power about her because she was toned with muscles, her black hair pulled back into a ponytail, her amber eyes staring ahead, her face neutral, and she had a beauty mark above her lip on the left side. However, before Cody could say anything to Lisa, she held her finger up to his lips and said only a few words before Cody nodded and left. "Eva," Chris said, "I'm not sure," as Eva continued to walk past him. "I'm glad you could make it," he added. Eva reached the others, ignoring Cody's attempt to give him a high five, and then she dropped her bag containing her weights by the outline of it on his foot, making some people laugh or smirk. She also had a rather large chest that, though not on Lindsay's level, was easily a H-cup that was bound in a tight blue top. Cody asked, "What's in their dumbbells?" as he held his foot in his hands and hopped a little. "Yes," Eva replied quickly, and Duncan laughed. He then turned to face DJ and Naruto, the two stronger-looking men on the island, before another boat pulled up. "Woohoo, Chris, what's happening?" a man shouted as he got off the boat. He was rather large in both height and size, with shaggy blonde hair, wearing a sleeveless white shirt with a blue maple leaf on the front, and green shorts. Chris had to pick his ear. Alleviate any ringing before the guy laughed enthusiastically. "This is awesome, woohoo," the guy cheered as Chris smiled and pointed his fingers at him. "Nice to be here, man," Owen said before picking up the host in a bear hug. "This is just so," Owen said, he said, pausing to think of the word as Chris appeared to be having difficulty breathing. "Yes, awesome woo," Owen nodded. "Are you going to be on my team?" Owen asked, and Gwen rolled her eyes and waved. Finger in a circle sarcastically. "Oh, I sure hope," she said before Owen cheered. "You about finished?" he asked, growing weary of being held by the big man. Owen thankfully put him back down. "Sorry, dude, I'm just so psyched." Chris cheered as another boat pulled up cool, and here comes Courtney. The girl had tan skin with freckles across the bridge of her nose, and her short brown hair started to fall down. Courtney smiled as she walked over to everyone else before pausing briefly to introduce herself. "Hello, you must be the other contestants. It's really nice to meet you all," she said, before Owen grabbed her hand to shake it. "How's it going?" "I'm Owen," she said. She was wearing a gray sweater with a white long-sleeve button shirt that had its sleeves rolled up underneath, which did well to accentuate her D-cup chest. Her dull green pants also did well to squeeze on her rear, which looked quite firm and full. As she stepped off the boat, Naruto laughed as he observed the effects the man was having on some of the girls, from the stone-faced Eva to even the strange Owen. The man was clearly attractive, with blue eyes, short dark brown hair, chiseled features, and toned lean muscles. He wore a dark green shirt that was essentially clinging to his chest and baggy gray jeans. She said, "Nice to meet you, oh wow," before drifting off after looking behind her after hearing another boat pull up and being shocked to see who it was. Naruto asked, "What are you not going mushy for, Mr. Model over there?" Gwen was apparently the only girl who wasn't swooning over the guy while she was idly polishing her nails. "Yeah, he's handsome, but he seems like the kind to be a bit only about looks. Seen enough of those back at my high school," she said, and Naruto nodded. They turned back to the guy as he approached Chris. "This is Justin, Chris," he said, before we bumped fists with him. "Thank you, Chris," he said. Chris said, "This is great, looking around a little to let you know that we chose you solely on the basis of your appearance." Justin shrugged his shoulders and said, "I can deal with that," before moving toward the other girls. The girls were still drooling over him, but Chris said, "Hey everyone," hoping to get them to stop as the next girl entered in her boat. She had bright green eyes and wavy orange hair, and her outfit was rather strange. She was wearing a tiny, sleeveless green top that pushed up Loy's cup chest. She wore a two-tone green song and green slippers for shoes, and even though it reached her neck, it did display some cleavage. "Hello Chris, hi Izzy," she exclaimed as she ran to the front of the boat, only to trip and fall off, slamming her chin onto the pier's edge, sending everyone reeling. "Oh, That was bad, Tyler laughed as Naruto sidestepped and rolled his eyes before passing his guitar to Gwen once more, who laughed and nodded, deciding he might as well be. This is a summer camp that is so cool. Do you have pap here? Are we having lunch soon? Izzy said with a giggle before she put her hands on her head except for hitting my chin. The only person to help her since no one else was like yours was any better dude, Naruto said as he and Courtney went over to help Izzy out of the water. Thank you for helping, Courtney said, feeling a little upset. No one else tried to help before they watched the orange-haired girl shake herself dry with a smile that felt so good. Before taking his guitar back from Gwen, Naruto chuckled and said to Courtney, well, she seems okay. First, we need a group photo for the promotional materials, Chris said, as Naruto carefully placed his guitar and amp in their waterproof cases before following everyone else as they descended. What, no guitar? Gwen joked, and Naruto shook his head, not that close to the water, especially considering how much it's worth. Gwen nodded sympathetically. As everyone positioned themselves, Naruto decided to stand with his arms crossed and smirking next to Trent, while Gwen leaned against him and grinned. Chris then got on the boat that Izzy had coming on, saying, okay, 1 2 3 now everyone say waka. As everyone said that, the dock began to tremble beneath them, and just as the photo was taken, they were all dropped into the water below. Okay guys, dry off, get changed, or whatever, and meet me back at the beach in 10, Chris said, causing everyone to groan. I forgot my guitar, Naruto droned out as he and Gwen headed to the shore, and Naruto's point of view changed. Naruto moaned as he dried off, grateful that he hadn't brought his guitar or kept anything important in his pockets because he thought Chris might do something similar. He was eager to see how this all played out, but to be honest, the only reason he agreed to appear on this show after a good friend of his told him about it was because he thought it would be a pleasant diversion from his demanding job and Gwen moaned as she patted the side of her head to try to get the water out of her ear as she stood at the beach with the other campers in front of two strange poles that weren't there early. Yes, a lot of us do. I swear that man planned this from the beginning, but I'm curious what he has planned for these things. Given the characters around him, it could prove to be entertaining, especially since they didn't know who he really was. Izzy said, poking her head over his shoulder, hey, I really like your whiskers, remind me of a kitty cat. Are they tattoos? As she immediately began rubbing her fingers over them with a big smile. They're birthmarks, and I like to think they look like a fox's whiskers, he said, smiling at her to display his sharp canines as he gently removed her hands from his cheeks, which made him laugh. The host was nowhere to be seen, so Heather moaned out, oh, chill out, not like we have anywhere to be, Duncan said with a scoff and rolling his eyes before the host pulled up on a quad and welcomed campers to Camp 1 Aqua Chris. She pouted for a moment before grinning at him, that's so cool, I can definitely see a fox now, cute and cuddly, and then ran off to another place in the crowd with a last-minute wink and smirk at him. As Duncan emerged from the crowd of people, he said, pardon me, Chris. What will the sleeping arrangements be on here? I'd like to request a bunk under her. He turned off the quad and parked. This will be your camp for the next 8 weeks. The campers standing around you will be your cabin mates, your competition, and possibly even your friends. The camper who manages to stay on Total Drama Island the longest without being voted off will win $100,000. Before Lindsay Rose raised her hand and said, excuse me, Kyle. Can I have a cabin with a lake view because I'm the prettiest? Lindsay asked. Chris dryly laughed, okay, you are, but that isn't how it's supposed to be. Be too happy, I doubt he'd make them co-eds, so don't worry too much, Naruto told her, causing Heather to sigh with relief. As much as Chris probably wanted to so that drama could be stirred up, he doubted it would be allowed. As she stepped out from the other campers, Chris asked, "Yes, Courtney, there are 23 of us and that doesn't really make for even teams." "It will work here," Chris said before removing a piece of paper. "So here's the deal in terms of teams. In a bit I will be splitting the 22 of you into 2 teams, he added with a smile. "Thank you for noticing as it allows me to start our first instant nomination challenge," Chris said. Pulled out 2 boxes with a circle cut out of the top, then kicked a big spool nearby that unrolled across the beach, leaving a rope line on the sand. "Wait, instant elimination hasn't happened yet." "We might go home," Beth asked anxiously, and Chris nodded. "Yes, in a challenge I like to call kicking and screaming, and here are the rules," Chris said, gesturing to the 2 big poles. "I'll pick 2 names out of the box and 1 out of the boy," he said. He looked at Duncan, who scoffed and turned away in embarrassment, as that was likely his plan. "Once off the pole, you have to get them across the line. The first person on the pole to be removed and dragged past this line is up for elimination, as are those who try to pry the girl or boy off the pole. But, just so you know, you can't punch or do anything like that to get them off. Couldn't get their person off the pole, those who stay on the pole and have gotten their person off the pole are safe, so you kind of want to be on the pole, but don't," Chris said, laughing, as he could see people arguing over whether or not they wanted their name to be pulled for the pole. Again, because there were 12 boys and 11 girls, 1 girl's name would be randomly removed from the previous names in the final round, and whichever team she ends up on would receive assistance on the next challenge. "Does everyone have the rules?" Chris asked, and they all nodded, which made him smile. "So, let's start with the first 2 names, Tyler and Katie." Tyler cheered excitedly, and Katie looked anxious as he pulled off Tyler. "We have Trent and Sty," Chris said, and Katie's other half sighed in relief. "We have Harold and Bridget for pulling off Katie," he added, after pulling out the names as the people chosen approached the line prepared to. As the people he had selected ran toward the poles, Chris yelled, "Good luck trying to get me off, you guys. My athletic body will keep me on this pole, so give up." Tyler boasted, "Harold, how about you actually start helping instead of ridiculously chopping her hands like that?" Bridget said, "I am helping my judo martial arts will," as the nerd stood on one leg while performing his weak chops on Katie's hands, leaving her alone to tug at her legs. Harold said, "Make her body weak and we'll win." Before a throat was cleared, he yelled, "You aren't doing judo, you idiot," and people stared at him strangely. "My mom runs a dojo of several martial arts," Naruto said, and the campers nodded. At that moment, they swiftly returned to the challenge to discover Suddy tickling Tyler, who was barely holding on to his pole with just his arms, while Trent was holding on to and tugging on Tyler's legs. "It's unfair," he said, his voice shaking as his arms. Chris, who was clearly trying not to laugh, said, "We could do anything but punching or stuff like that, but tickling is fine." As she continued to tickle him, his arms gave out and he began to wriggle, which allowed Trent to quickly begin dragging Tyler past the line. The first round goes to Trent and Suddy, who are safe from elimination, as is Katie for surviving, Chris said, as Bridget gave Harold a light glare that seemed to go unnoticed as he left. "Now, it's round 2 with Jeff and Heather on the poles. Jeff gets Courtney and Owen while Heather gets Cody and Al. Eva Chris responded with a laugh while Heather pet a little while Eva cracked her knuckles and asked, "Can't you break my bones to pull me off?" Chris nodded. The lawyers said that no physical harm, including punching, breaking, or biting, is allowed, and that you can even kick at them when they drag you away, which is how the name came to be. Chris yelled, "Come, Owen, my man, you can do better than that," as the next 4 individuals hurried to their poles. Jeff taunted them as Owen and Courtney attempted to tug on Jeff, but realized his muscles weren't just for show. Eva, however, charged ahead of the anxious Cody, who didn't want to get in her way, and almost instantly pulled Heather's arms off the pole with her superior strength. "No, let me go," Heather cried as she writhed, only to be lifted by Eva. "I don't know what I was expecting, but Eva, Cody and Jeff win immunity. Great show of strength there." Chris congratulated Eva as she shrugged her shoulders, still smirking as he went to pull the next one. Heather soon discovered that no matter how hard she tried to struggle, kick, or squirm, Eva's grip and strength left her completely outmatched as she found herself past the line and tossed off Eva's shoulder and onto her. "But at least give me a challenge, Chris," Eva said with a smile that worked. Noah and Izzy are the next names on the pole after that brief match. Noah has Beth and Duncan, and Izzy has Justin and Lindsay. Chris said, "But before you do anything, please hand over the needle you have done," before pointing to Duncan. Chris added a punk TSK and pulled it out with a frown, which made Noah sigh in gratitude and avoid getting pricked by the punk. "Oh, I'm so excited," Izzy said, laughing excitedly and hyperbolically. She put her arms and legs around the pole and said, "Maybe we should finish this up with Noah." He said, "Okay, then let's get started," and since Duncan was first in line and Beth was running after him while Lindsay was taking her time and Justin didn't seem very interested, Chris said, "How about you make this easy or else this might hurt." Duncan cracked his knuckles and looked down at Noah, and Beth stood off to one side, unsure of what to do. "Oh, come on, at least put up a challenge," Noah said as he released his grip and let Duncan drag him across the line by the ankle. "Fine, whatever Duncan does, Beth and Izzy get immunity and we're on to the final matchup, I suppose," Chris said as Lindsay pouted at being unable to participate in this challenge. "Which one of us do you think is going on a pole?" Gwen asked as Naruto rubbed his chin. "I'm hoping I get on there since it looks pretty." As Gwen laughed and rolled her eyes, he said, "I'd much rather be pulling than having myself pulled off, so we'll see." As Chris announced the next group of names, Lana and Ezekiel were on the pole last round. Gwen and DJ were pulling off Lana, while Ezekiel won Naruto through a random draw. Chris said, "I'm not scared, because she only won last time because she pulled off a girl and I'm a man," as everyone froze. Growling out, she appeared to be about to rip someone's throat, and Naruto, Gwen, and DJ all stepped back from her. "What guys are like stronger than girls, it's a fact she won't be able to pull me off because she's a girl and girls are weak just like P told me," Ezekiel said as Chris buried his face in his hand and Naruto patted Eva on the back. "You know what, I'll leave him to you, have at him, just try not to kill the boy," Chris said as he swiftly rose, his hand ready and go. As they watched Eva lift the pole and Ezekiel above her before she threw the pole over the line and stomped after it, the camera crew said, "I'm not weak, you little misogynistic pig, so get straight. Guys are stronger than girls, so I'll show you weak," Eva roared, not grabbing Ezekiel but the pole he was holding onto before she began to pull it up out of the beach. "Alright, everyone back, make some room," Naruto warned. Chris, who was taken aback by Eva's strength given that the pole was easily 15 feet long with 5 of those feet buried and embedded in the sand, said, "Do I even need to ask who you all want to eliminate?" as he watched as all the women and men glared at the perplexed homeschooled boy. Naruto and Lana were granted immunity, and Eva's team would have an advantage in the next challenge once they were created. As 2 interns picked him up and began to take him away back to the docks, Ezekiel yelled, "Get him off the island before someone like Eva murders the kid on live television." Now that a murder was narrowly escaped and the numbers are even, come and meet me by the campfire for teen assignments, Chris said as he hopped back on his quad and drove off, causing everyone to groan as they followed the host. Are you okay? Eva asked as they released her, and the other campers and guys hurried away. Naruto stayed behind for a little while, making sure to give her space as she panted in anger and clenched her fists. That little, __. Do I look weak? She yelled, glaring at him, and Naruto calmly held his hands up and placed them on her fists to lower them. Trust me, you don't look weak at all, because I'm positive you are the strongest camper here physically. That kid is just a misogynic, so don't let his remarks affect you. I think, Eva said, visibly calming down and blushing a little as she apologized, before Naruto removed his hands from hers with a smile. Great, now we really should catch up to the others as everyone is almost to the campfire. He told her, getting her to nod, because he wanted to keep her calm and reassure her. She took a few calming breaths, and he said, You're right, I'm here and that little punk is gone, thanks. Chris, who was still sitting on his quad with a smile on his face, said, Here, hurry and sit down so I can form your teams for the next 8 weeks. He was holding a piece of paper in his hands, and 2 garments, one dull red and the other dull green, were rolled up and sitting behind him. Here's the deal, we are going to split you up into 2 teams, and when I call your name please come over here, Chris said, gesturing to his right. Gwen, Trent, Heather, Cody, Lindsay, Beth, Katie, Owen, Lena, Justin and Noah said, From now on, you are officially known as the Screaming Gophers, before throwing the green rolled up cloth to Owen. As Owen cheered, the cloth unrolled to reveal the team's logo. But what about Katie? She asked anxiously, but Chris ignored her and gestured to the other people. The rest of you over here are Jeff, Bridget, DJ, Tyler, Suddy, Izzy, Courtney, Naruto, Duncan, Eva and Harold, Chris said, as those whose names were called out began to move to his left. But Katie's a gopher, I have to be a gopher. I guess it means we're enemies from now on, Suddy said as Courtney comforted her. Naruto smirked and looked at Gwen, who grinned and nodded. I'm not going to go easy on you just because you let me hold your guitar, she said, and he laughed and nodded. That's fair, but my offer to teach you still stands. Our teams may be enemies, but that doesn't mean I have to hate you or not speak to you, Naruto said as he walked over to his team. In reference to both teams, now that they had formally been formed, Chris said to her team, You guys, as the other team gathered before throwing the red cloth to Naruto, who caught it and allowed it to unfold. All right, campers, from now on you and your team will be on camera in all public areas during this competition. You will also be able to share your innermost thoughts on tape with video diaries anytime you want to let the audience at home know what. Chris gestured to an old-fashioned cabin in the distance, saying, You're really thinking, or to just get something off your chest, that what I like to call the confessional. Your belongings have already been moved, so all that's left to do is pick your beds, but since this is the first day, take into consideration the remainder of the day as your time to get settled in here before lunch is served in 30 minutes, Chris said, shrugging his shoulders. Shoulders and energized his quad, Jeff inquired, Will there be any sort of chaperone while we are here? Chris shrugged his shoulders once more. You are all between 16 and 18 because that's when counselors and training would start, so aside from me you will be unsupervised. Just don't do anything stupid because you all are on camera, Chris added before driving off, leaving them to their own devices. Naruto grinned because, thus far, he was happy with how things were going, and after unpacking, which went fairly well aside from a cockroach incident, they were now all lounging in the main hall. According to Naruto's book, the chef was an interesting man who reminded him of his friend's B's brother I. The man who instructed them to call him Chef Hatchet was a big, muscular, dark-skinned man with a mustache and a small goatee. The food looked strange, but he had seen stranger things whenever his sister or other friend Fu attempted to prepare food. "What are you going to say?" Blondie Chef yelled as Naruto glanced at his tray. "I'm enjoying this so far," Naruto said as he sat in the ooze camera trying it out for the first time. "This is different from what I'm used to, but that's good because I signed up for this because I wanted a break. So far, I've met some people, one of whom has somewhat caught my eye, and I might make some friends here. All in all, I can say this is going to be great," he concluded as he leaned back with a smirk confessional. At the end of the following day, Naruto moaned as a loud air horn was played through the camp's intercom system before he got out of bed. Chris's voice then clicked onto the intercom, and everyone pulled on their swimsuits and gathered in the main hall. "I hope none of you are afraid of heights," Chris said before the intercom cut out. "Great first thing in the morning, and a challenge. This will be great." Duncan groaned out as he fell out of his bed with glare, clearly unhappy about being woken up in that way. They didn't waste much time changing into their swimsuits in the shared restrooms before heading to the challenge in groups of 2 and 3 on the 2 golf carts the interns had for them. "What do you think they'll have us do?" Nero asked, looking at his swimsuit, which was a pair of black shorts with a red chain design crisscrossing on the right leg, as he turned to face Gwen, who was sitting next to him. "Their teams combined to make." While Naruto grinned excitedly, Gwen said, "I don't know personally. I'm really excited for this, and since it's a reward challenge we don't have to worry since he's making us get in swimsuits, so it's either something where we might get messy or something fully involving water. Either way I'm not too confident it'll be pleasant." Her swimsuit consisted of a strapless black and rather tight tube top style top and black short shorts made of the same waterproof material as her top. The further up the island's enormous cliff they got, the more Gwen became anxious. No way, you can't be serious," she said as she reached the top of the cliff, where Chris and the others were waiting for them. "But trust me, Gwen IMS, this reward will be very useful in surviving the island. Listen, this challenge is threefold," Chris said, holding up one finger. "Your first task is to jump off this." Bridget laughed and pointed to the cliffside. "If you look down, you will see 2 target areas," Chris said, ignoring the anxious glances around him. "The wider area represents the part of the lake that we have stocked with psychotic man-eating sharks. Inside that area though is a safe zone, which is your target area. If any member of your team jumps and actually survives, there will be a crate of supplies waiting below. Inside each crate are the materials you'll need for the second part of the challenge, which is building a hot tub." As the campers began to smile at the prospect of a hot tub, he said, "The team with the best one gets to have a wicked hot tub party tonight. The losers will have to watch and be refused to join unless the other team feels gracious enough to let you in." Chris concluded with a shrug because Eva was chosen at random yesterday and won both rounds. She was in her team, so they got some wicked carts too. As she looked over the edge, Bridget asked, "Who's first?" Chris said he stepped back to let them decide because of that killer base, and he even chose to remain silent because he'd much rather have someone else test the waters before him because he wasn't very eager to jump into shark-infested waters. "Ladies first," Duncan said. "Okay, I'll go first. It's no big deal, just an insane cliff dive into a..." Before she safely descended into the inner circle below, she said, "Lake of angry sharks." Naruto watched as his teammates dove into the water, waiting near the end as Gwen edged him along. "You're not scared, are you?" she teased, and he rolled his eyes and laughed. "No, I just want to stay up here a bit longer." "There are better things to see up here," he said with a smirk. Gwen blushed when she saw that he was staring at her and her swimsuit with a slightly uneasy smile, and she swore. light blush on his cheeks. Even though his tan skin made it difficult to tell what she was looking at, she asked with a hint of embarrassment before he smiled and looked her in the eyes. "Really, you, and how the swimsuit looks great on you," he said with a smirk as he lipped her over a little. He may not have much experience with real women because this was the first time he had ever flirted with someone and not had them simply flirt with him when he wasn't interested. Gwen didn't have much experience with boys as her goth. She was a little surprised by how direct he was being and how his eyes conveyed that he was taking the compliment seriously. "Well, don't stare too much," Gwen said, crossing her arms and turning her head away from him, blushing over her pale skin. "A little is okay," she said, laughing at his strange and humorous response. "Come on, Naruto, you're up, so stop flirting, Chris," she said, looking up at him and rolling her eyes. Naruto smirked as he stepped backwards off the cliff and let himself fall. He looked up at the sky, and his smirk grew as he performed a few free-fall back-flip spins before making his body point straight down so he could dive. "It's only you," Naruto said, glaring at the host, which only made Chris smirk. DJ and Courtney chickened out, and Katie and Sadie, the latter having switched teams in place of Izzy, had all leaped. Jeff slapped Naruto's fists as he made it back onto shore, saying, "Thanks, man. Let's get those crates loaded up so we can be ready to go once the other team makes it down." Naruto cheered, pushing his still spiky hair back off from in front of his eyes as he looked over to his team, who were also cheering at him before a boat came over to pick him up. "Nice going, man," Jeff said, watching Heather get apparently thrown over with Lana. Justin was the only one to actually land outside the safe zone before the sharks strangely brought him back to shore with hearts in their eyes, while Beth was the only chicken of her team before only Owen was left. He then continued to watch while he was getting the crates up as the other team began to jump, laughing mostly at Gwen as she made her way down. Everyone was a little nervous about him jumping, but he proved them wrong as he leaped off the "Great job, guys. Now that the last stint begins, start moving your crates back to camp. You can change after you're done because you'll need your suits for the hot tub party," Chris said. Cliff and cannonballed hard into the safe zone, which caused a huge wave to whip the boat out of the water and push everyone on the shore back, tangled, and toppled. The wave was even strong enough to send a shark up into a tree and another buried in the beach nearby. Over a megaphone before Naruto laughed and pushed himself off the beach to assist some of his teammates who were nearby in getting back on their feet as well. "You heard the man's legs get moving," Naruto said, laughing as he saw that there were 4 carts. "Everyone help get the carts back up so me, Eva, Duncan and Jeff can start pulling them back to camp as fast as we can," he said, taking some initiative as everyone nodded. "I've actually had experience as a CIT, so I should lead, so we do things," everyone nodded. "We don't need someone ordering us around that just makes people resentful. We need to work together as a team and not be bossed around," Courtney said as Eva turned to glare at her quiet chicken and assist in getting the carts back on their wheels. Naruto scowled as he rubbed the back of his neck, not attempting to bag on her but hopefully easing her anxiety about leading everyone with the carts and the ones pulling them so they could make it back to camp. "Incredibly quick with the others right behind us, so we should start opening the boxes so we can get the pieces out, right?" Duncan asked. Naruto nodded and threw him a crowbar, one of the tools Eva had won them. "Get everything out and look for instructions, and then we can begin." "We need to go to the bathroom," Katie said, and Naruto nodded and laughed. "Go ahead, no need to ask, as we are just unpacking right now. You two can help when you get back," he said. "I found some wood," Tyler said as he held up boards. "I think this is a pool liner," Eva said frowningly before Naruto nodded and grinned, Good, we are finding the pieces quickly, all we need are these. Naruto began to say, yes, with the instructions, now we can start, but DJ interrupted, a little unsure, as he held out a folded piece of paper. Where do we start? He asked, as he began to unfold them, but Bridget asked them all looking at him. Wasn't because he had the instructions. Well, I guess we start from the floor up with this thing, so we are going to need these pieces, he said, giving everyone time to read the instructions before they hurriedly began working together and building the hot tub. You see, the other team is already started. I told you we should have hurried and not waited for Owen to find his stupid trunks, Heather yelled, as the other team apparently had to push, pull and roll their crates to camp from the beach. They had carts. Trent, who wasn't entirely sure why Heather was so upset with them, said, just hurry and get the stuff out of the crates she ordered. Her team moaned and began unpacking, and they all said, okay, we're back. How can we help Katie and Sty? Bridget helped them catch up so they could continue building the hot tub, and at the rate they were going, they were able to finish their tub and have it look like it did on the front of their instructions by the time the other team arrived. Was only halfway finished, but since the goal was to see who could create the best hot tub, they had to wait until the Gophers finished theirs, which was held together with duct tape because the boards surrounding the base were jagged. Chris quickly determined that the killer base was the winner's because, as soon as he tapped, the screaming Gophers' tubet fell apart. Enjoy your hot tub portion, everyone else gets changed, and everyone is jealous. Additionally, since this is a party, the chef will bring your food. Later that night, as the killer base cheered for their victory and the other team complained that they had lost, Chris said, enjoy your hot tub. Bune moaned as she tossed and turned in bed, unable to fall asleep due to the combination of crickets and background noise, but as she was ready to go back to sleep, she heard a guitar among the noises. He can't be out there playing, she thought as she quietly slipped out of her bed and, before following the music, she raised her eyebrows in bewilderment when she discovered Naruto sitting in front of a fire with his guitar in hand leaning against the log. Before he saw her and scowled, she asked, Drat, did I wake you up? Gwen shook her head and looked down at him. I couldn't sleep and I heard a guitar figuring it was you before I left to check why are you out here, she said, and Naruto shrugged his shoulders. Before he patted the log behind him with a smile, he added, you can sit down if you want to. I always find that if you can't sleep company helps pass the time awake. Gwen shrugged her shoulders and sat down on the log before he slid up and sat next to her. So how was your hot tub party? Gwen asked. Music helps me relax because my job keeps me awake for long random periods of time, so my sleep schedule has been messed up for a while. Gwen rolled her eyes and gave him a playful shove, saying, sorry, but late at night isn't a good idea. Naruto smirked and shrugged his shoulders, not really my thing, but at least the hot tub was relaxing. I tried to ask if some of you could join, but my team was against it. If you want, we can take a quick dip, Naruto said, scratching his cheek with an embarrassed smile. Maybe another time, she teased, and he nodded and rubbed his chin. He smiled and said, start your guitar lessons. He then slipped the strap off his guitar and offered it to Gwen Wake. You were really serious about that? She asked, and he nodded as he said, of course, do you still want to learn? She looked down at his guitar, then looked back up at him and nodded, yeah, but I can't promise I'll be a good student, she teased, before he laughed and slid the guitar strap over her nonsense. It'll be fine, he said, adding, now we'll start with the basics. Before he lay down, excited to see what tomorrow would bring, Naruto couldn't help but smile as he silently put his guitar away. This show might be even better than I thought at first, he thought, unaware of the matching thoughts that Gwen was having over in her cabin. The lesson continued until they both started to get sleepy and decided to go back to bed, not realizing the smile and blush they both had as they enjoyed their time together. The morning at Camp Waka was calm as the sun was just rising and the camp was quiet from everyone sleeping until the sound of an air horn being blown through a megaphone blared out, jarring everyone awake. "Good morning, campers. Meet me by the docks in 10 minutes for the first challenge of the day. Make sure to put on your swimsuits because all but one of the characters are in danger because things will happen quite differently in this story with Naruto." It's about 7 in the morning, and the campers all moan to the elf, "You're going to get wet," Chris said to the megaphone. "Who does he think we are, farmers?" Lana yelled, and most of the campers agreed. Naruto moaned a little as he got out of bed, somewhat accustomed to being woken up early but not so abruptly. "Oh, that's definitely one way to be woken up in the morning," he said, and the guys around him nodded. "We'll have a challenge every 3 days, Duncan said, grabbing his suit. Heading out the door, Duncan admits that having 3 days off between challenges was nice, but it didn't make it any better to be woken up at the crack of dawn. In fact, he had enjoyed the 3 days prior, using them to meet some of the other campers and even spending more time with a goth girl who was genuinely a pleasure to spend with. Eventually, they arrived at the docks where their next challenge was waiting for them, which looked straightforward. Although it appeared to be a small platform, the first challenge of the day is actually quite large because you will be competing for individual immunity, which means that if you win this and your team loses the main challenge later today, you will be able to play for individual immunity. However, it quickly made them realize that there must be more to the dock. There were 22 poles near the edge, with a rope tied around the top of it, green for gophers and red for base, which had 5 knots in it. "Safe," Chris said before pointing to the poles and saying, "This is the site of your challenge, which I like to call backsplash," Chris said before he whistled and an intern came over. "This is how it will go. You will be randomly assigned to a platform according to your team and stand on the small platform," he said before pointing to the intern who climbed onto the platform and grabbed onto the rope, which you will need to move your hands past the next knot to avoid falling back every 5 minutes. Izzy said, "Oh, this reminds me of hiking up the mountain, though it was way more vertical," as she stood atop one of the poles. "Should we expect more of these personal immunity challenges?" Heather asked, and Chris shrugged his shoulders. "Continue to do so until you fall in," he said, as they watched the intern tremble as he moved his hands to the next knot before Chris shoved him and made him fall. "Wake up early, get a cold dip in the water, and tire out our arms sounds wonderful," Noah sighed. The host said, "Shoulders if I feel like it, now get off from on top of the pole and everyone onto the platform so we can begin." Chris hurried them onto the platforms before Owen held up his hand and asked, "Are there any bigger platforms?" "Mine is kind of small." Owen frowned before Chris shook his head, "Sorry, my man got to keep them all the same." Chris then quickly took a step back. "Okay, remember that every 5 minutes, this timer will go off, and you move down a knot this time, which will either stop once." Before he blew his air horn, Chris said, "Everyone falls or until those left standing are perpendicular with the pole." "This is easy, it won't be any problem at all for me to win this with my awesome skills," Harold said. Harold then readjusted his feet, which caused him to lose his balance and fall into the water. Soon after Harold took a dip, Owen and Noah quickly followed, while many others watched on the brink of falling. "Well, you all look good so far," Chris said. Chris remarked, there goes the first timer down a knot and lean on back just so you all know you only have 10 seconds to get past the knot or else you are eliminated, as he walked up and down the row of poles before the alarm went off. Everyone groaned as they went down a knot before Cody, Beth and Lindsay fell off because they were rushing and lost their balance. Gwen scowled a little as she wobbled on her platform while carefully adjusting her grip. Gwen glanced at her teammate Trent, who was about 5 feet away and seemed to maintain his balance with ease. "Gwen, how are you hanging?" she asked, looking at him. "Yeah, I guess I'm doing okay," she said, shrugging her shoulders a little before she quickly examined herself. She had spoken to Trent a little while on her team, and he seemed like a nice guy, and like Naruto had a musician vibe to him but in a different way, with Trent being mellower. Trent wasn't as outgoing and wasn't specifically searching for a boyfriend or anything, but the two musicians were intriguing in some ways. "How about you?" she asked, and Trent scowled. "It's a little challenging, but I should be okay for the time being. Next knot down," Trent said with a laugh. By the time the buzzer sounded again, some campers had fallen off, either because they lost their balance on the shaky platform or because the grip on the bar. Courtney, KDSTI, DJ and Tyler had fallen off while from the. As the campers gradually began to move their hands down, some of them lost it on the lean back. Eventually, only Naruto, Eva, and Jeff remained from base, and only Izzy remained from Gopher, who appeared to be enjoying it based on how she was acting. Gopher's Justin, Heather and Lisa had done a great job so far. "Some of you, like Eva, Naruto, and Jeff are doing great, while some of you, I'm surprised, are still on here," Chris said, grinning at them. Izzy remarked, "This is so trippy and awesome," as she glanced around, noting that they were only 2 knots away from 90 degrees. Jeff smiled and said, "Nice holding on for this long, bro." Naruto laughed and tightened his grip, asking, "You too, man, I'm not too sure how much longer I can keep up. What about you?" The party boy scowled a little. "Yeah, this is killing my arms, but I can last a bit longer." "All those keg," Jeff said, quickly covering up as Naruto laughed, realizing who the party boy was. "Going to really say what about you, Eva, how are you holding up?" Naruto asked as the bodybuilding woman a few posts earlier seemed to be having no problems at all. "I can keep this up all day," she said bluntly, looking straight ahead of her with a serious expression in her eyes. "Wow, that's some great upper body strength you got to have there. I mean, I do a lot of heavy lifting for my job, but even this is murder on my arms." Naruto said with an impressed whistle that he swore, causing Eva's lip to twitch up slightly in an attempt at a smirk before she stopped. As she worked to dry off after her dip in the water, Gwen was impressed by Naruto's decision to lean back and hold on. She laughed a little when he saw her, smirked, and gestured for her to approach him before swiftly rebalancing himself and having fun. "Naruto," she asked, looking up at her barrels of it. "You did pretty good holding on as well, Gwen," he said, rolling her eyes. "Not really, but I know my arms are going to feel it for the next few days," she muttering. Gwen L blushed quickly and turned her head away as she rubbed her sore arms, asking, "How are yours not on fire?" He smirked a little and said, "My job helps." She was about to respond, "What's your job?" before the buzzer went off again. "Woo, one more down, you all, and let's see who falls," Chris said excitedly, since he honestly didn't think anyone would get this far and wanted to see if anyone could get. Perpendicularly, Naruto struggled a little as he slowly lowered his hands and slowed his lean back to avoid falling off without even looking over as he assumed to be Jeff. With only Izzy, Eva and Naruto left leaning back, this is getting really intense here, and based on the expression on Naruto's face, he might be out next. Chris joked, thanks for the boost of confidence there, as Gwen rolled her eyes. Do you really want immunity this badly? Gwen asked, and Naruto simply grinned. Nope, think of this as a little exercise. I'm safe with my team right now. I just like the challenge that Naruto said, which made Gwen laugh a little. Naruto then smiled before she left him to stand by the others. Unfortunately, Naruto only lasted 2 more minutes before his arms gave out and he fell back into the water. Before Duncan and DJ helped him get up, he asked, "You did really good, man, strongest guy in camp." Duncan nodded respectfully before. Izzy is still going strong, but I feel that's just because she's a bit out there, Cody pointed out as the orange-haired girl was giggling excitedly as she hung back, which only made everyone nod along with him. It feels like I'm water skiing, said Naruto as he and many of his teammates were impressed by how solid she was and how she was showing no signs of tiring. DJ gave him a towel, "Thank you, but Eva is definitely a beast right now." Before she began to wobble uncontrollably and fell back into the water, Izzy pouted and said, "Aw man, I was enjoying that." Eva then used the rope to pull herself up, and Chris declared, "The winner is Eva, nice feat of strength." Eva shrugged her shoulders, and as a result, you have immunity for the next challenge to protect yourself from elimination should your team lose. Before he said that, he threw her a wooden carving of his head, which is the McCann statue of immunity. It only works for you, so keep it around as I will ask for it. He said, "Okay, I want you all to get back into your normal clothes and meet me back in front of the cabins again in 10 minutes for the real challenge of the day." As the campers moaned, "Come on, Chris, our arms are dead from this. Are we really doing it immediately?" Lana asked, and Chris nodded, "Yep, you'll see why once the challenge is revealed." Eva rolled her eyes, wishing she could throw it away before she pocketed it. Before leaving them to quickly dry off and change in order to move on to the next challenge, he said, "Now hurry up and get changed. We are burning daylight here." Naruto moaned as he walked beside Gwen H., who nodded along, "Yeah, and if he's not willing to let us rest then I have a real bad feeling about the next challenge." Naruto scowled and nodded, "Well, whatever it is, I doubt it'll be that bad as this is the start of things." Chris yelled, "You can't rest yet, because the first part of the main challenge today is a 20 kilometers run around the lake," as everyone moaned from a mixture of fatigue and soreness. "Work up to the really bad stuff," he said before Gwen rolled her eyes, "Oh joy, so we have worse things to look forward to." Gwen complained before they went into their cabins to quickly change and back up with Chris out front for the rest of their challenge of the day. Even though she wasn't hurt from the first challenge, funny Eva growled out and stomped toward Chris before Naruto and Jeff struggled to stop her. "Easy there, Eva," Naruto said, "I know you want to murder him, as we all do right now, but don't get kicked off right after you won immunity for a well-deserved punch." Eva appeared to calm down a bit and relax, then remarked, "Fine, I'm fine, might as well get this over with Eva," before she left. Wow, Eva really needs to work. As Naruto shrugged his shoulders, Courtney frowned and said, "I think it's mainly her not being a morning person as most of us aren't. She'll calm down the more she wakes up." Naruto defended Eva, saying that while she was upset and angry a lot, it was usually presented by her not talking to people or slightly glaring, so it wasn't that bad. However, over the past 3 days, she has thrown her suitcase out of a window and broken a bathroom lock. He said, "I don't know about you, but I've kicked open a door once or twice due to really needing to pee," as Courtney was about to say something, but he held up his hand to stop her. In other words, while she may have anger management issues, bringing them up and mentioning them to her won't help. This happened when I was helping her pick up her luggage, and she was more upset with herself for forgetting something important. However, he said, make her angry since none of us like to have our flaws pointed out. Courtney looked at him in amazement, and he said, wow, that's really mature. Before Naruto laughed, he asked, I know right, you wouldn't picture it given my rocker vibe. Courtney blushed in embarrassment, and he waved her away, saying, relax, the only reason I'm this mature about it is because I have a friend who dealt with anger issues and I was there to help him. Naruto smirked as he stood next to an upset-looking Gwen. I am so not running this long this early in the morning right after that armed killing challenge, she droned out. I'm as dense as any other guy, but I'm good at what I have experience with, he said, smirking and patting her on the back before he and Courtney joined the others as they lined up for the 20-kilometer run. You just want a reason to hold me, don't you? Naruto asked, raising an eyebrow at her. From the prank stories he told her about and the strange songs he knew how to play on his guitar, Gwen asked as Naruto looked down at her with his hand on his chest in mock hurt. That's not true, but it's a good amount of it, he said with a laugh, and she simply rolled her eyes. Thanks, but no thanks, you goof, she said, because he was quite the oddball. Alright, campers, enough talk. Chris counted down and yelled before firing a starter pistol and the majority of campers began running, while the few who weren't just began to walk well. If you don't want to run, then I guess I'll see you at the mess hall, Naruto said. Gwen nodded, and he began to run ahead of her and the others who weren't running. It didn't take him long to catch up to Eva, who had a good lead over the others. I'm not even tired from the last challenge. You really are a fierce competitor. I'm just glad you are on my team, Naruto said, laughing. Aren't too shabby there since you know you lasted pretty long as well, Eva said, adding that she didn't really hate or feel angry at this one teammate of hers because he seemed to help her. If anything, it was strange because most people just avoided her. I mean, I work out and stay in shape, but not as serious as you do, he said, as Eva glared. What are you saying? I have no life, she yelled, and Naruto shook his head, but wasn't driven away by her rage. His words, your life is an amazing feat, startled her a little because he didn't yell back or anything like she was used to when she was talking to people. I really want to race you, are you up for it? He asked, bringing her out of her shock before she gave him a slight smirk. If you can even keep up, she said, before she began to run faster, which made him laugh and push himself to keep up with her. The run went by quickly for both of them now that they had someone to race against, as they were easily the. Eva was the first to arrive at the mess hall and by a significant margin. Well, I guess you aren't as weak as the others, she said, panting a little as Naruto hunched over the table to catch his breath before grinning up at her and saying, thank you, I strive to impress. It took a while considering how fast the two of them raced, but eventually everyone arrived with the last of the killer BAS showing up last. About time you all show up, we just lost the challenge, Courtney shouted as Harold entered the room, I think I'm having heart palpitations, before stumbling to the table and saying, wait, that means we win, as Heather and the rest of her team cheered. Chris then held up his hand and said, hold your horses, guys. That wasn't the challenge because, as I mentioned earlier, the race was the first part and winning it doesn't earn you anything. This quickly deflated the gopher's joy before he grabbed a cord that was fastened to a nearby curtain. You have feasts like this at your place? Asked Chris, who was hungry, as he tugged at the cord to open the curtain and reveal a long table stacked with a Thanksgiving-style dinner. He didn't even have time to say anything else because many of the campers hurried. This reminds me of dinners at home, Naruto said, grinning as he ate a drumstick, mashed potatoes, corn, and a variety of other items on his plate. Yes, my mom tends to go overboard whenever I'm home since my job keeps me away a lot. As he received a nod of agreement from Naruto and a few others, he said, I understand since my mama does the same thing, man, makes me miss her cooking even more as nothing can compare. They all enjoyed the feast, but the food didn't last long because Owen kept going back for seconds with the size of his servings. Given Owen's rather large appetite, there wasn't ever really going to be leftovers. As a result, Chris had to plate him with multiple cans of baked beans he had just in case. Are you all filled up good? Chris asked, taking the campers' groans as their agreement that it was time for the real challenge. Really, what challenge could involve us killing our arms, running around and then eating a feast? Trent asked, and Chris smiled, I'm glad you asked, your challenge is called the Awaken, before shouting into the megaphone. Owen asked with a huge smirk as he finished his beans and tossed the empty cannon over his shoulder to join the mountain he had created behind him. Don't worry, this is an easy one. The team with the last camper standing wins invincibility. You fall asleep and you are out, Chris said as Gwen rubbed her temples, meaning that everything up to this point was an attempt to make it more difficult for us to stay awake. Yes, move on out of the mess hall, Chris said as they left. When he stood beside Gwen, waiting for everyone in front of them to file out, he said, how long do you think before everyone is out cold? Some of these people don't look like they are too good at staying up for long. Owen walked past them, half awake, and asked, Chris, are we allowed to bring out things to help ourselves stay awake? I'm not talking like caffeine or anything, as Chris scowled and debated it in his mind. It was more or less his ace in the hole, so it didn't take him long to grab what he had in mind and arrive at the campfire with a smirk. Gwen looked at him with a raised eyebrow, saying, really, your guitar, before widening her eyes. If it prolongs the game or makes it harder for others to stay awake, then go for it and meet us by the campfire when you're done, Chris said. Or something, aren't you? Gwen stated as Naruto nodded and sat down beside her on an empty stump. Oh, definitely, and I do know some softer songs that might make things harder. All's fair and love and war when, he said with a wink. Come on, that can't be fair, she said, frowning as she turned to face Chris. I checked with him beforehand, Heather, but just because I can doesn't mean my team instantly wins. Don't give up or anything, as it wouldn't be as fun when we win, Naruto said, grinning. As he strummed his guitar and adjusted the volume on his amp that he wore on his hip to make it a nice listening volume, Naruto asked, can you do requests? Heather narrowed her eyes a little but smirked back at him. Of course, it depends on whether I know the song. Naruto enjoyed himself as he played requests from his teammates and even some non-teammates. The time flew by as they mostly chatted, played some songs, and moved around. Before most of them realized that they had all stayed up for 12 hours, Chris said, nice going, everyone is still awake at the 12-hour mark. Most of them appeared exhausted, with a few people being worse off than others. Woohoo, stay awake for 12 hours, he said, pumping his fist into the air. Owen cheered, then froze and fell forward loudly, snoring, demonstrating how he had instantly passed out. That's one down, Naruto said, strumming his guitar after descending to the ground and resting his back. Before he looked up at Gwen and said, this is the most boring thing I've ever done. Gwen moaned, and Naruto nodded, but nothing is exciting, so he said, I have my guitar if you want, I can give you more lessons. Gwen shook her head and smiled, saying, maybe later when my second wind comes around, if it does, don't want to drop it or anything, before she looked around until she raised an eyebrow at Lindsay, who was standing upside down on her. Of strangers and have it filmed on TV even though it was clearly resolved. No issue, Lindsay. My name is Naruto. He said he didn't mind too much because based on what he had observed of her interacting with other campers, it appeared she had trouble remembering names. At least she was in the same ballpark, so he asked if she could speak. Before waiting for Naruto, she smiled down at Lindsay and said, "Happy to help others in my own way." She is definitely trying for something that could have been a bit more secretive about it, Duncan remarked as Naruto nodded with a smirk after he sat back down. It's not the most subtle, I'd say, but I don't know if she's trying to be bold, you know, Naruto said as he continued to play his guitar. So how long have you been acting like that? He said as he walked off smiling and waved back to her Lindsay Beth. Can I talk to you for a sec? Heather asked, and the two girls nodded, got back up and followed her until she left. Duncan asked, have you been able to play like this? Naruto scowled and cocked his head to the side, trying to recall. I think it's been a while, but yeah, it's been a while, he said, laughing, before his eyes caught something on the ground close to Chris. Hey Eva, I think you dropped your MP3 player over near Chris, he said, noticing that Eva had been frantically searching around with an angry expression on her face. What were Eva yelled as she fled. I think it might be your MP3 player because all I can see is something shiny, he said, as Eva darted towards the spot he pointed to before skidding to a stop. Thank God I found it, she said, looking around because she had been furious that she had dropped it and because she was not allowed to leave the campfire area where Chris was standing because of a challenge. I would have torn this place apart to find this, Naruto laughed. I know the feeling as being trapped on this island. That MP3, he said, player is going to be very important, and then, shocking everyone by stomping toward him and embracing him tightly, Eva showed off her strength. He was grateful, and he quickly moved his guitar into his right hand so that it wouldn't be crushed or sandwiched between them. Thank you, she must have said, as he rubbed her back with his free arm. No problem, Eva, glad I was able to save it for you, he said with a smile before she put him down and coughed into her fist. Well, good luck staying up for the challenge. Before she left to return to her seat, she said, wow, that was intense. How did you know she wasn't going to hit you or something? Jeff said, and Naruto rolled his eyes. Come on, she's not some rabid bear. The sooner you guys stop acting scared of her and realize that she won't kill you for the slightest thing, the better. Before Eva shoved Cody away from her while he was trying to listen to her music, everyone looked at him with raised eyebrows. The 24-hour mark rolled around from the Gopher. Izzy, Lana, and Noah had passed out, and Bridget, Katie and Suddy had passed out from the base. It's not that she didn't have a temper, and really, no one can say they wouldn't get annoyed if someone tried to get close to them without saying anything like that. Naruto said as he sat back down on the ground with a laugh, and everyone nodded as they somewhat understood it. Congrats, campers. You've made it to the 24-hour mark. It's time to step it up with fairy tales, Chris said as he removed the sheet from a pile of books. Chef came out next to him, dressed in a pink sheet costume, holding a harp. At this point, Chris added, there was no music to drown me out. Eva growled and took out her headphones, and Naruto turned off his amplifier with a frown. You're not serious, Gwen said, as Chris grinned and opened the first book. I am now. Shush, Chris said. As Chris began reading, the fairy tales were killer. He cleared his throat and Chef strummed his harp to add to it. Cody, Jeff, Harold, Beth, and Lindsay all passed out, but in Cody's case, they were knocked out by Owen's sleep farts, which had also claimed Noah earlier in the day. Chris's next strategy, playing the Nutcracker's dance of the Sugar Plum Fairies, wasn't as effective because there weren't many campers left, but it was able to knock out Harold and DJ, the latter who, Courtney muttered to herself as she jogged in place to keep awake. Duncan and Naruto were sneaking peeks at her, but as it jiggled slightly, she said, "Hey Naruto, want to work out with me to help me stay awake?" as she looked down at him and Gwen. "You still want to work out after the run and arm challenge?" "I swear my arms are still killing me from it," Gwen exclaimed in surprise as Naruto shrugged his shoulders and said, "Yeah, a little exercise might help plus gives others a view." He winked as he got up at the person who rolled her eyes and smirked. "Yeah, your chisel dabs will keep me awake or allow me to sleep, whichever makes you feel better," she said, before Naruto grinned and placed his hands on his hips. "Oh, do you think they're chisel?" he asked, giving her a slight flush, which made him laugh as he and Eva walked around to the other side. As Eva shrugged her shoulders and said, "Sure, whatever you said before you get down on the ground and start doing some push-ups with them joining you shortly," Duncan said, "Side of the campfire care if I join you too, a little movement might help as well." To be honest, the workout helped, but not for very long, even though it gave some of the girls something to look at. Naruto quickly threw away his shirt, saying, "Damn girl, that boy is fine, like third-degree burns kind of hot." Lisa purred out as she sat on a stump next to Gwen and licked her. "I guess if you like the Adonis-like men," Courtney stuttered out a bit, her eyes glued to Naruto with a dark blush on her face as she tried to deny it. "I figured Eva wouldn't be too tired to work out, but I'm surprised the other two can still go at it," Trent said as he and the other females stared at Naruto while he worked out. Some of them were more overt about their staring, while others, like Katie, said that Lady Bridget and Courtney were a little embarrassed to stare. Walked over, his eyebrow raised at the sight in front of him, and Duncan said, "What, I got a rep to protect." He then continued working out, saying, "It doesn't surprise me, though, because I'm sure you've all seen Naruto on his runs after breakfast." Gwen said, "As much as possible, Naruto took a run after breakfast to show his body wasn't just for show, really. At least it shows the guy has some nice stamina." Lisa smirked at the slight pink blush on several girls' cheeks, as Chris blew his air horn as much as this is drawing us ratings from female viewers. "You are diverting attention from the challenge, so I'll put your shirt back on and stop the girls from drooling," Chris said as Naruto laughed and got to his feet. Some girls jeered at Chris for forcing him to do so, but he said, "Well, at least it kept me awake for a while." He was going to return to his seat next to Gwen, but he frowned a little when he saw that she was chatting with Tren. "Now, it's fair enough. Did get dragged away," he thought as he stepped back and bumped into the man who said, "Just was sorry there." He then raised an eyebrow to get a better look at the man's face. "Wait a second," he said, smearing the paint on Justin's eyelid with his finger. "Shut up, no way I got to see this," Chris said as he ran over from where he was standing. Just as Justin opened his eyes, "This is totally wicked, you're totally eliminated, but still an interesting plan," Chris said, as Justin shrugged his shoulders and sighed. Naruto had to give it to Justin for his clever tactic, cheating as it may be. He then sat down at an empty stump and started strumming on his guitar until someone popped up on the seat next to him. "This seat wasn't taken, was it? If not, would it be okay if I sat here?" Heather asked, crossing her legs in front of her and grinning at him. "I don't mind at all, Heather. I welcome someone to talk to," Naruto said, staring at him for a moment. Heather's leg, because the girl's short shorts only made her legs appear longer, but as he stared and spoke with her, he missed how she glanced at him out of the corner of her eye, frowning slightly before shaking her head and turning back to Trent. Time passed as both teams battled to be the last one standing, and by the time any of them really noticed, they had been up for 85 hours straight, knocking out everyone except Naruto, Duncan and Gwen. Gwen moaned. She moved on next to him after Heather and Trent had passed out, and she was shocked by how well Naruto looked after staying up this late. "Oh, trust me, my job keeps me up for days straight sometimes. I think my longest record was 5 days, he said, smirking as he continued to strum on his guitar. Really, what job do you have that requires you to stay up this long? Gwen asked, along with a few others who had. We were intrigued when he brought up this job of his, and before I tell you, he winked at us. However, before Chris returned to the campfire with a cup of coffee, he teased, "What's wrong with you people? Come on, fall asleep already," Chris said impatiently, not expecting them to last 3.5 days. "You got to hook me up, man, I'll even eat the ground anything," Gwen said as she reached up to grab Chris' coffee, only for him to pull it away from her. He said, "All right, fine, you three stay with me while the rest of you get up and go get a shower, for heaven's sake, you stink." As the campers woke up and took a warning sniff, they all cringed a little. "I honestly didn't want it to come to this, but you all are too damn strong, so get ready for Chris," he said, taking out a large book and clearing his throat. He finished the pop-up book, which was a beaver cutout from Chapter 1. He used air quotes to say, "national symbol and a damn fine hat." Duncan and Gwen moaned as Naruto played the BMTSH notes on his guitar while wearing a flat expression. They all honestly lost track of time, but by the time he finished half of the pop-up book, Duncan had passed out on the ground beneath them. "Dang, you two are beasts. You two get a bathroom break before we continue, any takers?" Chris asked, implying that since there were 10 more chapters. "Cool, as long as you don't mind company or a 5-minute time limit," Chris said as Naruto removed his guitar and put it in its case. Naruto shrugged his shoulders and said, "That's fine for a limit, and just don't come into the stall and I'll be good with it." The blonde responded, popping his joints and cracking his neck as he made his way to the bathroom with the camera crew following him. He made his bathroom break very quick, not trusting himself to sit down or else he might pass out. A lot to his surprised, he returned to the campfire and caught Gwen just as she was falling asleep on her stump. Finally, Chris declared, "Naruto wins it for the killer base." Nero held his arms up in a cheer. "Awesome, can I sleep now?" with a flat face, feeling the effects of being away for 3.5 days crashing down on him. He wasn't sure how much longer he might have lasted if Gwen hadn't passed out. Sure, he had stayed up longer, but he had more to occupy himself during those 5 days. In contrast to the screaming Gophers, who had an elimination ceremony to worry about campfire later that night, Naruto grabbed his guitar and walked slowly back to the cabin. He grinned as his team congratulated him before they both went to bed. "Yes, sleep up and rest as you definitely deserved it," Chris said as he stood in front of the moderately awake screaming Gophers. "When I call your name, come up and grab a marshmallow though." As he concluded his explanation of the elimination process to the Gophers, he said, "Camper that does not receive one must immediately return to the dock of shame, catch the boat of losers, and leave, and you can never come back ever. You all were strong in the Awaken, but one of you made it surprisingly difficult for the rest of you, even having knocked out a few of your own team members, so this was rather unanimous, but I'm still going to draw it out," he said, as different eyes turned to their unaware teammate. As the half-slumbering goth girl went up to get her marshmallow, he continued to list the names of the Gophers until only Justin and Owen were left with one marshmallow remaining on the plate. Justin, you were towing the line when it came to cheating, he said, making the attractive teen a little worried before the host nodded. Yeah, painting your eyes is wicked, but you slept for the majority of the first full day and a half before you were caught, he said. I'm sorry, guys, but it was really great meeting you all. Good luck, and I'll be cheering on my fellow Gophers. But you are safe, he said, causing Justin to exhale in relief. Owen, my man, you noxious sleep farts killed a few of your own teammates and you were even the first to pass out after only staying up for 12 hours for that, so you must board the boat of losers and leave, he said as he got to his feet, frowning. As he and a few others waved Owen away, Trent said, friendly, it was nice meeting you two men. Thank you. The Gophers returned to camp without one big, lovable O, and I was shocked to see Naruto leaning against his cabin, smiling at her. What are you doing awake? Gwen said, shrugging his shoulders. They were barely able to wake me up for this damn thing. I was heading to the bathroom when I heard the boat fire up and wanted to. I'll miss the big guy, but you can't believe how much he farted in our cabin, Naruto said, shivering, then letting out a tired yawn, slightly slumping up against the cabin, making Gwen frown a little. Hey, if you want to go back to sleep, you can as I'm about to hit the sack as well, she said, nodding, and adding, make sure they didn't vote off my competition, I mean you last pretty dang long. Wanted to let you know that I kind of enjoyed this challenge because it allowed me to scout my competition fairly well. Now that I know who I'll have to keep an eye on, Naruto smirked and eyed Gwen up and down, making her blush and smile a little. Just make sure that if you keep your eye on me, it's above my neck, she teased as he held his hand up like a Boy Scout, no promises. He winked again, making her blush a little more before they both laughed. I'll see you after we get some sleep, I'm not doing any late. She said, night lessons until I unzombify, and he nodded to Roger that evening. He watched her go to her cabin before she turned to face him. Night Naruto, she said, grinning, as she shut the door behind her. She felt less irritated by the challenge, and perhaps she could make some friends at this crazy camp or something.